Hello there, Miss Ruby Sunday. You okay? Oh, yes, I'm okay, I'm fine. I'm just heading to that local village down there. I've lost my friend, though. It's a bit odd. Oh, would you like me to help you? Oh, by the way, if you're passing that woman down there, could you just tell her that I'm fine? I don't need her help anymore. It's all good. She can leave me alone now, unless she's seen my friend, the doctor. Maybe if you ask her that, but otherwise, I don't need her help. Just ask her to leave me alone. Oh yeah, sure, no worries. I'll go and I'll go and talk to her. Yeah, sure, no worries. Okay, cheers, thank you. I like this guy. Hello there, you must be that mysterious woman that we saw from 73 yards away. Miss Ruby Sunday is saying that she's fine, she's okay, you don't need to help her or whatnot. Can you leave her alone? Unless you know where a Mr. the Doctor is, perhaps you could help us there. Oh, well, that's very nice of you, thank you very much. Okay, this is getting a bit weird now. Okay, I'm kind of creeped out, so I'm just gonna go. And for the purposes of comedy, I'm gonna do it whilst screaming in terror and looking really scared. For fuck's sake. Is there nobody that I meet who then goes over to that woman and doesn't then run away screaming in terror and saying, ask her, and looking at me like I'm the worst person ever? Like, is there nobody who would not do that?
Wokeness.
Oh, for fuck's sake, not you.
This episode is really woke because it's centering on the female main character. Blah! Yes, I know we've had episodes like this in the past, but it's the time of criticizing stuff for being woke, so wokeness, woke shit.
Like, my life's kind of shit right now. I don't need you to be here.
Stupid blanket.
Hang on, I've got a good idea.
Oh, different woke lady. Oh well, you're still woke. What are you doing? Is this a woke thing? I wouldn't know anything about it. It's only criticise. I mean, I criticise stuff I don't know about, but that's part of my character. I think I'll skip the rest of this sketch. Actually, I'll come back next week or whenever you need me for comedy.
Haha! That's one person unhappy to run away screaming in terror, etc., after seeing that woman and talking to her.
Wokeness! She said woke stuff. What did she say? Ask her! Ask her! But it was woke! I know it was woke! She said woke things! Ah!
Oh, for fuck's sake, nothing changes. You know, screw this. On with the review. I'm off to stop Roger at Gilliam or something. I just hope he's not upsetting my friend Marty or whatever they're doing in their private time. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 1, Bad Wolf / Series 14 / Season 40, Episode 4, 73 Yards, the most mysterious episode of the series besides the finale. Also, apologies in advance. At time of recording, I've got a bit of a cold, so I won't sound as great as I usually do. Because of that, it might be a bit more slower, a bit more stiffly. And the throat's a little bit sore, so I shouldn't talk too much too long. So 73 Yards. At time of this episode coming out in May, and after the second viewing as well, this was one of my favourites, even though I did notice a few things at the time, which I didn't think were, I think there were some problems with the episode, but we'll get into those. So the plot of the story is that the Doctor and Ruby arrive in Wales, in present-day Wales. The Doctor accidentally steps in a fairy circle, and Ruby reads some letters addressed to a Mad Jack. Suddenly, the Doctor disappears, and Ruby is locked out of the TARDIS, and ends up being followed by this mysterious woman, always staying 73 yards away from her. Which is, fun fact, the distance that Rusty Davis measured on Swansea Pier for the story. Is that the one at the Mumbles? Because according to that Imagine programme, he lives in the Mumbles. If so, I've been there. I've been to that pier. I don't think we went too far down, but we went on a little bit of it last summer. And anyone who talks to this mysterious woman who's always 73 yards away from Ruby doing these sort of hand signals, like she's trying to say something, everyone who talks to her is scared and runs away and abandons Ruby, as we see with Susan Twist's character to begin with. By the way, with Susan Twist, I forgot to mention her in Boom. She was the ambulance AI interface, the face of that. And also for Space Babies, she was like a member. I think I might mention it in the Devil's Court review. She was a member of the crew that was forced to abandon the ship. So, last episode was her most notable role in the series at the time, and I think it is outside of the finale. But characters are starting to recognise her, as we see here and in the next episode, Dot and Bubble and Rogue, so the Doctor and Ruby are starting to notice her. Ruby then ventures to the local village and meets some Welsh people who then play a prank on her because she's English and she may have some outdated views on the Welsh people, or at least from in their point of view, like the whole superstition, witchcraft, and fairy stuff, and they have a bit of a laugh about it with her. The landlady is particularly crusty and frosty with her, but despite a bit of harmless fun at the time, the woman continues to be a presence around Ruby and starts to bring a negative effect around everywhere. So she decides to go home, but it seems that the woman is continuing these effects wherever she goes. She eventually causes Carla to run out on Ruby and eventually put an injunction against her. And then later, Kate Stewart and Unit come to help, but they are then scared away from Ruby, and she's then eventually left abandoned on her own for a while and is forced to live her life mostly alone, either because of the woman or because scaring them away, or because the woman is a distraction for her. She's accidentally driving other people away, as we see her on a few dates, and they're sort of not going very well because she's always distracted by the woman. Or in the case of the last one, by a news report of Roger ap Gilliam, a Welshman who the Doctor had mentioned to be the most dangerous Prime Minister of the UK, taking it to near nuclear destruction, according to him earlier on, or nuclear warfare, nuclear threat. So Ruby realises that her purpose might be to stop Roger ap Gilliam from taking the world to the brink of nuclear war, and so she enlists her woman. But the woman kind of has to follow her. She kind of uses her woman as a way to stop Roger as she infiltrates the Albion Party, which I suppose is supposed to be a rift on the Conservatives and the Reform UK parties, but Roger's also kind of using some more like the Labour Party as well to his kind of advantage. So somewhere, I think it's somewhere kind of in the middle, I guess, because he claims to be a working class person, but his politics are more on the right side of the political spectrum, so he's sort of somewhere between the Labour and the Conservative parties. But Roger eventually ends up winning his constituency seat and later the Prime Minister gig when he's voted, when Albin wins the election and he's voted in Prime Minister. And he plans to buy Pakistan's nuclear arsenal and get the launch codes, and they're planning a big celebration for it. But it's theoretical that he is going to launch them on Saturday. So Ruby has to use her woman 73 yards away in order to scare off Roger Ap Gilliam, which is her way of having to stop him. So that's the plot of 73 yards. Sorry if I'm a little bit slower today because of the cold. So, yeah, this is a really great story. I'm agreeing with the consensus. I mean, they're not everybody got on board with it, fair enough. But I think this is a really great story. It has a really great build-up. The first act with the tension of the fairy circle and the potential folklore horror elements and the stuff in the pub, that's all really well built up. And it ends up being a joke, but they build it up really well, and then the dour nature sets in a little bit later on with the woman still knocking about being the woman in this story. So I think that first half's probably the strongest, with the whole build up to a possible Welsh folk tale horror story, which is probably what we kind of thought it was going to be. But then again, we also had the rumours of the Roger Ap Gilliam stuff as well. So it was going to be a merger of the folklore horror and the political stuff. And it's tied in really well as a bit of a slice of life stuff in the middle, because it's pretty good at building the tension in the first quarter in Wales, at the village, at the pub. But with the woman following Ruby, it gets a bit more serious as people she knows and loves run away scared of her, and friends of the Doctor, allies of the Doctor, Kate Stewart unit, they all go, and presumably no one else helps out Ruby because of the woman. They always try to either interact with her or when they're trying to do some scientific research on her stuff, very little is happening. So she's supposedly defying all known science, and they're dealing more with supernatural, as Kate's mentioned. All this build-up's really good, and then we eventually come to a montage of Ruby having to go through her birthday with less and less people celebrating it with her, until she ends up having to go and help save the world from Roger Ap Gilliam. We then get a different type of tension, with the tension of this potentially dangerous man and what he could do and what he could say, and the threat that he poses, and the threat he's going to have if he gets those nuclear weapon codes. So the tension is really there, building it up, and the actor playing Roger is brilliant. He's bringing both a charming, charismatic personality to his front appearances, but then he brings that level of tension and danger and fear to Ruby and the audience when they're in private. However, he's a bit underused, especially the second part. After the scenes with him and Ruby, after the Newsnight interview, he's kind of just there as the face of the party, and then being scared by the woman. So we don't see as much of a threat as he is usually, but that one scene there at the Newsnight Centre did build up that tension. We knew it was a big deal, so props to that. Now, one of my problems I did have with the episode, and I noticed this first time, and even more so on the second time, was the character of Marty that Roger takes an interest with. And then Ruby and her become sort of friends, and Marty seems to be afraid of Roger, naturally because of the whole nuclear codes thing. But I didn't notice this at the time, but apparently this was supposed to be an allegory for a potentially abusive relationship, or if not physically, at least emotionally, or he could maybe gets angry or maybe scare her, make her like scared me. Not even if he doesn't necessarily say anything insultive or do anything to her, he could the fact that he could get angry would be enough to put the fear into her. I think that's supposed to be the implication. It's less apparent here than the racism allegory in the next episode. More on that next time. Because I think it's supposed to be saying that Roger could be a abusive partner, or at the very least, could be a abusive partner if pushed, or if his emotions got the better of him, or he was just a really scary guy, or he wasn't, or at the very least, not very nice. Like maybe controlling or something, but maybe he liked her, but she is like fearful of him, so to speak. I always thought it was the fact that she was just plain out scared of him, like because of the whole nuclear codes thing, and that she's the one who realizes that as well, at the pitch. And then Ruby turns around and say, "I'm sorry, I had to be sure, but I wish I could help you." Like, what? I'm pretty sure there's a bit of this subplot is missing. Maybe it's in the novelization, but the character of Marty in the subplot really should have been expanded upon, or just maybe not really added, because it's so little done. And also, we know Roger's a big threat. We don't really need to know he's an abusive partner, theoretically, to know he's a big bad. Like, we're already kind of scared from him because of that interaction with Ruby. He's put us on edge, put that tension there, and we know he's a dangerous threat from what the Doctor said and Ruby remembering it. I'm not sure, as Mr. TARDIS said in his review, why do we need to then have this whole subplot about the abusive relationship, which isn't even, it's not even that apparent. It was more apparent in Last of the Time Lords, because they actually showed, maybe younger audiences would have missed it, but they showed Lucy Saxton had been given beatings, and she did have an injured leg at one point, and it looked like she had been badly treated by the Master, which ends up being part of her motivation to kill him at the end of that episode. So that had a point. They were in a loving relationship in the first half of second part. It was a three-parter. Sound of Drums, and then in Last of the Time Lords, she's more mistreated, mostly off screen, but we see the effects of it, and that ends up being part of her reason to execute the Master at the end of that story, personally. But Marty, there isn't even that much. I thought maybe in the scene where Ruby talks to her in the offices, maybe there was a bit of makeup on her to imply that she looks more tired or stressed out because of that, but not really. No, she doesn't look that much different compared to later. We didn't really get a good shot of her face in the Newsnight scene, but the other bits, no, there isn't really much implication physically. So, I mean, it's still possible Roger could just still scare her by just getting cross a lot or being an intimidating figure, but or there is a more psychological or a verbal abuse rather than physical. But again, it's hardly touched upon, and it's kind of just left there in the background. At least, again, Last of the Time Lords, it was more obvious, and that also means it's incredibly relevant to the following Master story, The End of Time, which serves as a sequel to the Series 3 finale. There is a bit regarding Roger Ap Gilliam that's going to pop up later in this series finale, but it has nothing to do with Marty. So the whole Marty stuff is going to end up being a bit irrelevant as far as future stories are concerned, unless they come back to this story again later down the line. As for here, it's just underdeveloped and undercooked, and that was my big problem at the time. Also, why was everybody getting cross with Ruby when she stepped onto this grass? Yes, they said don't step on the grass, but why were they starting to get really shouty and rowdy? And when she got the phone, the police with guns went off. Like, did they think she was going to assassinate Roger? Did she think she she had a weapon in her phone? Did they think that she was going to send illegal photos of him ahead of the Saturday event? Why? Why is stepping on the grass with a phone out, just measuring, like she doesn't even take a picture, she's measuring, and even then, she puts it down and they're still got the guns pointed at her. Like, what are you guys fucking thinking? Are you really that scared of a possible photo or video leak ahead of this certain date? Like, and when she puts the phone down, like, what were they thinking? Were they thinking she was going to assassinate him? They don't say so. They just shouting at her for no reason. I mean, I understand some of them getting cross for disobeying the rules, but then why did the police get involved? That the police come in with the guns and, like, threaten to shoot her if she doesn't stop. Bloody hell. So, yeah, it's the climax of the Roger Ap Gilliam stuff kind of falls a little flat. I don't think we had as much time with it to build. It really needed either a whole episode or half an episode dedicated to it. But this episode is kind of a 3-4 way structure with, like, maybe even 5. With the whole stuff on the cliff top leading into the Welsh village stuff, leading into the day at the stuff in London and Ruby's family, and then later into with Unit, and then the montage, which then leads into the arriving at when Roger becomes Prime Minister, and then finally when we come to the ending with older Ruby, and then the revelation that it was apparently older Ruby at the very end of her life that's sort of frozen in this sort of loop as the woman, and she goes back in time to warn her younger self, and if her younger self doesn't know, stop the Doctor from stepping on the fairy circle, then the woman is then trapped with Ruby for the rest of her life, scaring other people away, and then eventually coming for Ruby at the end of her life, and they have to go and do it to then fix the problem. I mean, it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense, but I can sort of see where it's going. I certainly like it a bit more now than I did at the time, although it probably would have been better if they'd either used the same actress of the woman to play older Ruby, or Millie Gibson played an older Ruby. But the actress who does play the older Ruby is also really good as well. I would say 73 Yards is very strong for the most part in its first 2/3. First half of the story, with the stuff from the beginning up to the montage. By the way, as brilliant as Millie Gibson looks, I don't think she can quite pull off looking 40 whilst as a 19-year-old. Yeah, 20, 25, even 30 to a lesser degree, but not so much 40. I think they needed a bit more makeup there and just putting on a longer wig and glasses. She probably would have pulled off the 80-something look, though, because that would have been more intensive, older makeup and wig. They've done it in the past before. Really good stuff with David Tennant and Matt Smith, for example. I won't say the story is entirely perfect up to then, but I think it is probably at its strongest and most powerful and impactful, and the emotions are running high. Firstly, with the really great tension in the pub, and with this mysterious woman having just joined and then following Ruby, and then the emotional impact that the woman scaring her mother away, and how upsetting that is for Ruby. We're really on her side by then. And then Kate and Unit abandoning her. It's a real struggle, and I like how the story handles that. Even the earlier Roger Ap Gilliam stuff is handled really well, with the tension building surrounding him. It's just a shame we don't get more of it, or enough of it to fully develop the character, fully develop what we add to the threat. Also, apparently a scene about mandatory DNA that is going to be used for Empire of Death was apparently cut from this episode, but it's probable that they could have filmed it at the same time and used it for Empire of Death instead of this episode. Though, if they did release a version of this story later down the line, maybe for a possible The Collection Season 40 box set, then they could do an extended version of this episode with that scene added, alongside maybe a few others. Like, it would be good to have a few more extra scenes concerning Roger Ap Gilliam, and building more of the threat, as well as also the relationship with Marty, expanding on that, because that is definitely the weakest part of the story. It's just kind of there. We don't need to have Roger be an abusive partner to know he's a big bad. Or if you are going to do the abusive relationship, whatever form of abuse it is, or fear-mongering, then I would say actually develop it. Actually, you don't necessarily have to show it too much in detail, but maybe like one black eye, or one reference to his anger or his, like, something he may have said, just something, anything, to actually say, yes, he is a abusive, or at the very least, scary partner. Otherwise, don't do it. You can't have the bare minimum. Or at least not without it kind of feeling out of place or underdeveloped. And then, like I said, the ending, whilst it worked on Ruby's part, I don't get why everybody else was making such a big fuss about it. In the story, I mean. And then Marty also laughs when Roger runs off. Again, that really needed a bit more development. And I'm surprised Ruby wasn't arrested after that, considering they were threatening to fucking shoot her in that scene. And yet, she's at the end of the day, next day, she's watching the resignation news and the Deputy Prime Minister's appointment on the telly with a glass of wine. All fine and dandy, at home. All fine and dandy. So, I don't know what those police fuckers were thinking. And then the ending, I guess, sort of works. The whole older Ruby becomes the woman, it kind of works. And the whole stuff with older Ruby is nice. And then the whole revelation of it's actually her, that kind of makes sense. I think it was a bit more off-putting at the time, but it sort of makes sense on reflection. Before I wrap up, I would like to say that this is Millie Gibson's best performance of the entire show so far, hands down, and it was her first episode filmed. Episode 1, production-wise, of the whole series, after the 60th specials, Shooting Atwell was away doing sex education filming at the time, besides when they could get him for the scenes on the cliffs. And same for Dot and Bubble, where they were able to get him and Millie in a room to do their scenes, as well as on location for the ending of that story. But besides those bits, he was more or less away, filming another show. So Millie Gibson had to really step up for this Dr. Light story. Interestingly, that it's both Dr. Light and Companion Light that focus on another character are back-to-back in the broadcast order. I mean, production order, that makes sense. But broadcast order, it's interesting. I might talk more about that either in the next review or in the ranking. But I find it interesting and a bit strange that they put both episodes where the Doctor is absent, for the most part, back-to-back in the broadcast order, and it's slap bang in the middle of the series for both of them. Maybe it would have been better to have something else in the middle, like Devil's Court, for example. And what's more, Boom had the Doctor mostly immobilized for most of that story, as he was stuck on that mine for one place. So between that one, this one, and next one, the Doctor doesn't really do an awful lot in his first season, the 15th Doctor. It was for production reasons for these two episodes, and then Boom, it was that interesting idea. But when you put those through back-to-back in the broadcast order, it does make the Doctor have less agency in his own series outside of those first two and last three episodes. Maybe if it was a longer series, it might have worked a bit better, but it's only 8 episodes, not including Christmas, so I find it a bit odd, but it's alright. Episode 6 is going to more than make up for it by giving the Doctor a love interest. Excellent. I would say the rest of the cast is also absolutely brilliant in this story. Like, all the cast members, regular and guest, are probably at their best, with the possible exception of Anita Dodson, who's probably at her best in the finale, but more on that when we get to that story. Same for maybe Gemma Redgrave as well, but she's probably even stronger here than she was in the 60th and in her 13th Doctor story appearances. It's also great to see her briefly in this story, to know that she is still a presence after seeing her in The Giggle, and before we see her again in Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death. And to know Unit's still a presence, and that even they are struggling to identify this woman and also abandon Ruby afterwards. Again, with Roger Apgillian, the actor does a fantastic job selling the danger with him whilst also being incredibly charming. So he does both sides of the coin really well. But again, he's sort of underused later on in that part of the story. And the whole stuff with Marty feels undercooked and underdeveloped and could easily have been removed if it wasn't really needed. Production-wise, this is one of the best-looking episodes of the series. It does use a few visual effects in places, But for the most part, this one looks fairly practical. In fact, mostly practical. In fact, I'm not even sure how much of the story has CG or visual effect elements. I think this is the main practical story of the series in terms of production, the main practically made one. Very little visual effects when not needed, and mostly done fairly practically. Lots of location filming, lots of costume makeup work. All of it looks really great. Maybe the very end has a bit of visual effects as well, but for the most part, this is a practical heavy story, and it feels really, really great because of that. And following the completely filmed in a studio boom, and preceding Dot and Bubble, which is sort of part outside, but it's in this sort of bubble world. There's characters talking in their own bubbles, in their own rooms, or whatever. The amount of space we get to breathe in this story, with all the locations and the settings, is brilliant. This is a really great put together story. It may not be perfect overall with the script, but it's definitely a damn bloody brilliantly made one, and it's definitely one of the best, if not the best looking story of the season, and most of it was practical. Fantastic. Overall, I shall be passing 73 yards at a very highly respectable 9 out of 10. This is the score I had at the time. I thought maybe kind of leaning on the 10, but the whole stuff with Marty was my problem at the time, and it's sort of kind of developed there. I've seen a few other nitpicks here and there and criticisms, but overall, I'm pretty happy for most of this story until the second part of the Roger Ap Gilliam storyline, where it kind of is hurried up a bit more. So probably so they could have that ending and also more time with building up to it. With doing, but maybe if the episode, I think this episode is like 48, 49 minutes. If this one was maybe an hour, we could have had a bit more time. But alas, this is how it stands. So I'm going to be sticking with my 9 out of 10 score. It didn't quite get to 10 at the time, and currently it's staying at the 9 level. Is it my favourite story of the season? Well, I don't think so, because another episode of the season, I believe, that's coming up later, I think might be my favourite, and I might put Church on Ruby Road over this one because I just really enjoy that one so much. So I think this one might come third overall, but I'll make that final decision in the ranking. In terms of the stories post Church on Ruby Road, for the rest of the season, not including Christmas, it would be second. But if Church on Ruby Road is going second on overall, then pretty much everything else, apart from my favourite, if it remains my favourite, would be one place below it anyway. So yeah, 73 yards, not including the Christmas special. I think it's my second favourite of the season. Third, if I do count the Christmas special, but Rogue, the one which is currently my favourite, prior to rewatching it for the reviews, could easily still be my favourite after I do that rewatch and review. So yeah, I'll make that final decision when we come to the ranking after every episode has been rewatched and reviewed. But before we get to what could potentially be my favourite episode of Season 1 / Series 14 / Season 40 and current favourite episode of the 15th Doctor's era, we have another pretty strong episode that might not necessarily feel that easy to watch. Like, 73 yards was easier to watch, and that had the emotional impact with Ruby Sunday. What episode could potentially be a harder watch than that? How about one with an unlikable lead that is a little bit annoying in places and ends up being an absolute bitch, and is one of a whole cities full of racist entitled bastards, apart from maybe one exception, but we'll discuss that at the time. And even then, that's because we don't really see much of that. If you like your commentary on modern day technology, young people, and racism, then stay tuned for next time, where we look at Dot and Bubble, the 5th episode of the series. I'll see you guys next time.
Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.